I was commissioned in 2007 to illustrate the cover and the interiors of this book, a novel by James Newman called The Wicked. It was a limited edition. I think they only printed 350 copies, so it was a numbered edition. This is an artist proof in AP of the published book. Signature sheet page, yeah, AC for artist copy for artist proof. I did the cover in acrylic polymer in a technique more closely associated with egg tempera, which I learned in college at the Hartford Art School under the famous dinosaur painter Rudolf Zallinger. Acrylic is so much like egg tempera in that it's water-based. You can use thin washes or semi-opaque layers of paint, one on top of the other as the lower layer dries. That I incorporated the egg tempera painting technique in doing this cover. One of the cool things about doing limited editions is they do limited editions. This was the lettered edition in a metal box. I did not paint the flames. You can see essentially the same book. Only this is only 26 lettered copies. And this is my, I guess, number 27. Because it didn't get a number, it got my name and I was able to sign it. Very, very rare. Very rare. So, how did I do it? Let's see. Professor Zallinger's Water Media Studio class actually had a required textbook for those of us interested in egg tempera, which the art school's bookshop had in stock. Cennino Cennini's early 14th century treatise called The Book of the Art, luckily translated from the original medieval Italian. In that book, he laid out step by step how to prepare a painting panel, how to make gesso grounds out of marble dust and hide glue, how to grind pigments to butter consistency, how to use the yolk of an egg as the binder to mix with the pigments to actually create the paint. And most importantly, how to properly apply that paint to the gesso ground to make it stick and to create images and paintings that would stand the test of time. Just pay a visit to the early medieval painting gallery in your largest local art museum to see what I mean. Professor Zallinger also exposed us to modern egg tempera painting techniques like those used by contemporary artists like Andrew Wyeth and Robert Vickery. For those interested, seek out Vickery's outstanding book called New Techniques in Egg Tempera. Another book Zallinger recommended, and a book that I devoured. I still use it today. One of Cennino Cennini's rules was to formulate your composition beforehand, at the outset, and commit it to the gesso panel in ink, drawing what he termed cartoons of every element with cross-hatching for shadows. Neither Wyeth nor Vickery followed that particular rule, but I kind of took to it and usually made it my first step in all of my egg tempera paintings. And later on, a lot of my acrylic paintings as well. But first, the publisher, the writer, and I had to agree on the cover image. After reading the manuscript, I got some ideas and sent scans of a few pencil sketches. The one everyone agreed on, the demon Moloch in the foreground, sort of silhouetted against a wall of flames, with the brooding statue of the bull above, was this sketch here. So I cut an illustration board, single weight Bainbridge, cold pressed, so there was a slight tooth to the surface, to a size that would fit my little flatbed scanner, slightly larger than 8.5 by 11. And I drew in pencil the borders and crop marks to a rectangle that would be proportional to the final dust jacket cover dimensions the publisher provided. I drew in the composition in a waterproof India ink using a number 0 technical pen. I think it was a Castell, but it might have been a Rapidograph, I forget. On top of that, in very transparent washes of color, in this case the three primaries, ultramarine blue, cadmium yellow light, and cadmium red medium, I blocked in the big shapes, immediately setting up my warm and cool areas. But as you can see, the ink shines right through those. In this next step, I added some opaque color to the flames and just tentative dark areas in the smoke above. I also added some warm violet washes to the skin of Moloch in the foreground, starting to add some dimension in his beard, and also to define a left side light source to him as well. Here I'm still using brushes to apply the paint. Here I'm adding more warmth to the exposed skin areas, deepening the beard, the shadows in the beard, and defining the dark areas of the smoke. I also started using a small sea sponge to apply the yellow areas of the flames in sort of a pouncing technique, helping to soften their focus and getting rid of any hard lines there. Here the smoke shadows are more defined using burnt umber mixed in with a little blue to keep the shadows warm, but not too warm. The edges of the statue are more defined, and the surface of the statue is being worked on in preparation for the next step. The solid flame yellows are basically done at this point, so I was able to redefine the hair silhouetted against that, allowing the figure to really pop from the background. Here, I used tracing paper to mask everything except the statue. That's because I only wanted to work on the statue and not affect anything else in the painting. What I did was I dipped an old toothbrush in a slurry of blue and umber and shook out most of it. Then used my thumb to run across the bristles, sending a fine splatter of paint, little dots sprayed across the exposed area. This is a good way to begin to create a stone texture. Wyeth did this a lot in his watercolors and dry brush watercolor paintings. He probably did the same in his temperas, but you know that was then masked by later layers. Vickery actually demonstrated this technique in his tempera how-to book, and Professor Zallinger also gave me some pointers about it in class. Here I show where I highlighted the bigger dots of splatter with a pure white using one of my smallest sable brushes. These highlights gave the pockmarks in the statue real depth. I also refined the reflected light off the tops of the horns to add to their depth. I see a lot of illustrators do this too much, though, which actually detracts from the illusion of reality rather than adding to it. Subtlety is the key. I also added more opaque color to the foreground flames using the sponge, and tiny dots of color to the flames above them for rising cinders. Here I finally focused on the demon using a dry brush technique, which is accomplished by filling a small acrylic bristle brush with color and then squeezing out most of it so I could scumble thin layers of opaque paint while allowing a bit of the warmer underlay to show through. This technique allowed me to sculpt the skin folds and wrinkles using several tints of grayed out blue. Using those same colors, I went into the beard with my final work on the hair using my finest sable brushes to define the details. I also used a fine nib technical pen, probably the same one I had used to do the original ink drawing, to do the same thing with the shadows using black ink. This image you see here is essentially the finished painting, ready for scanning. Well, here's one more look at the book. Another lettered edition box, this one red, the other one had more black accents. And again, another copy with no letter. So this is what 2 after Z, I guess you'd call it. One thing I didn't show you before for the lettered edition, it's leather bound, red leather with blue emboss cover. And what the book jacket designer did was he took this color scheme and in Photoshop, I imagine he just continued it across here to cover the back. Again, I didn't paint this. This is all photoshopped in by, I believe it was the late, great, let's see, David Barnett, Fat Cat Design. Wonderful guy. Sorely missed. So that's the way it finally came out.